There are civilizations that built monuments of stone, and others that built monuments within the human soul. Among the deserts of Kemet, the land the Greeks later called Egypt, spirituality was not a matter of belief, but of knowledge. The priests of the temples of Luxor and Dendera did not speak of gods in the way modern religions do. They spoke of Neteru, principles of the cosmos, reflections of the One, mirrored in the heart of humanity. For them, man was not a fallen creature struggling toward salvation. He was a divine being in temporary forgetfulness, destined to awaken to the memory of his own eternity. To the initiates of Kemet, life itself was the sacred laboratory of the soul. Religion, in its external form, was a vessel, but the true current flowed inward, toward self-realization. This was not worship of distant powers, but the study of divine law manifested in every aspect of creation. Mathematics, astronomy, architecture, and ethics were all expressions of Ma'at, the universal order of truth, balance, and justice. To live in Ma'at was to live in harmony with the rhythm of the cosmos. To know oneself was to align with the intelligence that governs stars and atoms alike. Inscribed on the temple walls of Luxor in the ancient tongue of Medu Neter was a phrase that carried the essence of this entire philosophy. Rek em ab, know thyself. It was not merely advice, it was commandment, initiation, and prophecy. To know oneself was to remember that the divine spark, the Ba, already resides within. Ignorance, illusion, and attachment veil this truth. But through discipline, meditation, and the cultivation of the heart, the human being could rise through levels of consciousness as surely as the sun rises each morning over the Nile. The path was clear and structured, not mystical chaos, but sacred science. The sages of Kemet taught that human consciousness unfolds in three great stages. The first, Sahu, is the earthly man, bound to sensation, desire, and material illusion. The second, Ab, is the awakening of the heart, the seat of divine intelligence, where truth and compassion are balanced upon the scales of Ma'at. And the third, Ba, is the luminous soul, free, eternal, and aware of its unity with the Source. These were not abstract ideals, but lived realities, experienced through initiatory practice and inner transformation. The temples served as universities of the soul, where priests, scholars, and seekers studied geometry not for architecture alone, but to comprehend the geometry of spirit. Every column, every hieroglyph, every ritual was designed to reflect the structure of the cosmos and the anatomy of consciousness. The initiate moved through the sanctuaries as one moves through the chambers of the self, from darkness into light, from ignorance into wisdom, from mortality into remembrance. This was the true meaning of resurrection long before the concept reached other faiths, the rebirth of awareness, the triumph of the divine within man. The myth of Asar and Aset was not a story about external gods, but a map of the human condition, dismemberment and reassembly, death and renewal, the eternal cycle through which the soul rediscovers its divine origin. Today, as humanity stands again at the crossroads between knowledge and forgetfulness, the wisdom of Kemet calls across millennia. It reminds us that the path to divinity was never lost, only obscured by time and translation. The science of the spirit is not confined to the past. It lives wherever truth is sought and the heart remains open to its own light. This documentary invites you to walk that ancient path, the path of Tehuti, of Ma'at, of the living Neter within you. From Sahu to Ab, from Ab to Ba, you will witness how the people of the Nile understood the journey of consciousness as the journey of creation itself. And as we retrace their steps, from the sands of Luxor to the stars above, may you remember what they always knew, that to know the self is to know the divine. Long before philosophy bore a Greek name, before religion divided the heavens from the earth, there was Kemet, the Black Land, where wisdom was measured not by belief, but by understanding. The sages of this ancient civilization saw no separation between the spiritual and the scientific, the visible and the invisible. To them, the study of the cosmos was an act of devotion, and devotion itself was a form of science. The temples that rose along the Nile were not mere places of worship. They were universities of the soul, sanctuaries where mathematics, medicine, astronomy, and ethics were taught as reflections of a single divine order. Within their columns, inscribed in the sacred Medu Nater, the words of God, the priests recorded not commandments to be obeyed, but laws to be understood, the universal principles through which creation maintains its harmony. Kemet's spiritual system rested upon Ma'at, the cosmic equilibrium that governed both stars and human hearts. Ma'at was truth, balance, justice, and order, not as moral abstractions, but as the underlying structure of existence. Every ritual, every equation, every temple design expressed her geometry. The golden ratio that shapes the pyramids was the same harmony sought in the human soul. To live in Ma'at meant to think, speak, and act in alignment with the cosmic pattern. This understanding gave rise to a civilization where science, art, and spirituality were threads of a single tapestry. The scribes who charted the heavens, the architects who measured the sun's shadow, and the healers who invoked the breath of Ankh all participated in one great purpose: to mirror the perfection of the cosmos within the microcosm of man. Unlike the later religious systems that demanded belief in unseen powers, Kemetic spirituality required knowledge through direct experience. The word religion as we know it, from the Latin religare, to bind, has no equivalent in Medu Nater. The people of Kemet did not seek to bind themselves to divinity. They sought to reveal it from within. They practiced remembrance, to know through the heart. Knowledge was not a matter of intellect alone, but of vibration, harmony, and moral purity. The initiate's journey began not in blind faith, but in conscious observation, studying the cycles of the sun, the phases of the moon, the behavior of water and wind, the mathematics of the stars. For the priest-scientists of Kemet, to understand the natural world was to converse with the mind of the Creator. Central to this philosophy was the concept of Heka, the power of the creative word. In the act of speech resided the energy that shapes reality. When Ra, the solar principle, uttered the first word, the universe unfolded. Every human carried within them that same power to speak, think, and manifest in harmony or in chaos. This was not superstition, but metaphysical science, the recognition that vibration is creation and that sound, form, and consciousness are interwoven. Heka was used not to control, but to align, a sacred art of tuning human intention to divine frequency. It is the ancestor of what later traditions would call prayer, mantra, or logos. Another pillar of Kemetic understanding was Ka, the life force that animates all beings. It was not the soul itself, but its energy, the current that connects the physical body to the unseen dimensions. The Ka flowed through every living form, sustained by breath, food, and spiritual discipline. When harmonized with Ba, the eternal aspect of the self, it became a vessel of divine light. Together with Heka, Ka formed the sacred triad of manifestation: thought, life, and word. These forces were not external deities, but dimensions of the same consciousness. The Neteru, those so-called gods, were not anthropomorphic figures demanding worship, but archetypes of cosmic principles: Ra, the solar intelligence; Tehuti, the divine mind; Aset, the universal mother; Asar, the regenerative spirit. To know them was to know aspects of one's own being. The Kemetic temples were designed as living textbooks. Each corridor represented stages of initiation, each chamber a lesson in cosmology and psychology. The architecture itself was symbolic, the outer courtyard corresponding to the physical realm, the hypostyle hall to the mental, and the inner sanctuary to the spiritual. The priest instructors led aspirants through rituals, chants, and mathematical exercises that refined perception and purified emotion. The goal was to transform the initiate from a being of instinct into a being of awareness. The process was gradual, disciplined, and deeply experiential. The Temple of Luxor, for instance, was constructed according to the proportions of the human body, illustrating the maxim that man is the measure of all things, and that the divine temple is within. In the mystery schools, knowledge of the stars was inseparable from knowledge of the self. Astronomy was psychology. Chemistry was alchemy. Every phenomenon in nature was understood as a correspondence of inner processes. The rising of Sirius, the star Sopdet, marking the flood of the Nile, symbolized the awakening of spiritual intuition, the flood of higher consciousness within the seeker. Geometry was not a tool for building pyramids alone, but a language of divine relationships. Numbers were sacred expressions of being, 1 as unity, 2 as polarity, 3 as harmony. Through number and form, the initiate learned that the universe is not chaos, but music, the song of record in stone, water, and flesh. The science of the soul that flourished in Kemet would later inspire the philosophies of Greece, India, and beyond. Scholars such as Pythagoras, Plato, and later Hermetic thinkers studied in the temples of Kemet, carrying fragments of that wisdom back to their own lands. Yet, as time passed, the original African roots of this spiritual science were obscured. The teachings of Ma'at, Heka, and Ka were reinterpreted through foreign tongues, often stripped of their ethical and cosmological depth. The modern world inherited the form of science, but not its sacredness. What was once a path to divine realization became a search for external control. To return to the foundations of Kemetic spiritual science, therefore, is not an act of nostalgia, but of remembrance, a restoration of the ancient harmony between reason and revelation, intellect and intuition, man and nature. As the sun of Kemet once rose over temples aligned with the stars, so too must the light of understanding rise again within the human spirit. The ancestors of the Nile left not dogma, but direction, not superstition, but structure. Their legacy is the map of consciousness itself, a science of being that begins with the question, who am I? And in the stillness of that inquiry, the same answer resounds across eternity. I am that which the Creator is, the mirror of the cosmos, the image of the divine. To understand the divine in Kemet is to understand order, not the rigid order of human laws, but the living equilibrium of the cosmos. The ancients conceived the universe as an emanation of consciousness, unfolding through patterns of divine intelligence known as the Neteru. These were not gods competing for worship. They were cosmic principles, the eternal forces through which the one became the many. The word Neter itself carries the sense of power, function, or aspect of divinity. It describes a frequency rather than a figure, an energy rather than an ego. For the priests and sages of Kemet, every element of creation, from the star to the grain of sand, was animated by these intelligences. The sun rose not simply because of physics, but because Ra willed illumination into being. Rain nourished the earth not by chance, but through the loving reciprocity of Tefnut and Geb. The universe was alive, conscious, and purposeful, a living body of divine law. The architecture of this cosmos was symbolized through sacred triads, families of divine principles expressing the generative rhythm of creation. In the beginning was Atum, the self-created one, emerging from the primordial waters of Nun. From Atum issued Shu and Tefnut, air and moisture, representing polarity, the first breath of duality within unity. From their union came Geb, the earth, and Nut, the sky, the marriage of matter and spirit, eternally separated, yet forever joined by love. From Geb and Nut were born Asar, Aset, Set, and Nebet-Het, the principles of life, wisdom, chaos, and transformation. These cycles of emanation mirrored the natural order and human psychology alike. To know these stories was to know oneself, for the divine drama unfolded not in heaven alone, but within the consciousness of man. Each netter represented an archetypal power within the human being. Asar embodied the regenerative spirit, the part of us that seeks wholeness after dismemberment. Aset, the Great Mother, represented intuition, nurturing, and the capacity to restore. Heru, born from their union, symbolized the awakened consciousness, the victory of light over darkness, awareness over ignorance. Tehuti, scribe of the gods, was divine intellect, the mind that measures and records the laws of the universe. Ma'at was the moral compass, the harmony that keeps all forces in balance. Set was not evil, but the necessary force of opposition, the catalyst that tests and strengthens the soul. In this theology of balance, nothing was profane, only misunderstood. The task of the initiate was to harmonize these internal powers, to become a living synthesis of the Neteru, an embodiment of cosmic order in human form. The great temples were constructed as diagrams of this divine architecture. Their pylons mirrored the horizon where the son of Ra was reborn each morning. Their halls symbolized the journey from multiplicity to unity. In Dendera, the Temple of Hathor reflected the nurturing aspect of the cosmos, celebrating beauty, joy, and love as sacred principles. In Edfu, dedicated to Heru, every relief and proportion told the story of the soul's triumph over ignorance. The ceilings of the temples were painted with constellations, not as decoration, but as maps of consciousness. The ancients did not separate astronomy from theology. The heavens were the visible expression of the invisible order. To study the stars was to read the mind of Ra. In psychological terms, the Neteru can be understood as the earliest articulation of archetypes, forces shaping human behavior and perception. Modern thinkers like Carl Jung would later explore similar concepts under the language of the collective unconscious. Yet the priests of Kemet had already charted this inner terrain thousands of years earlier. Each nadir corresponded to a faculty of the human psyche, and the rituals of invocation were not acts of idolatry, but methods of inner alignment. When a devotee offered to Aset, they were awakening intuition. When they prayed to Heru, they summoned courage and clarity. When they honored Ma'at, they balanced thought and emotion. The pantheon of Kemet was therefore a psychology of divinity, a manual for the integration of the soul. The relationship between these forces was expressed through precise mathematical ratios and geometries. The cosmic order was reflected in architecture, music, and the human body. The spiral of the nautilus, the proportions of the temples, and the rhythm of chants all followed the same harmonic principles. This understanding would later influence the Greek concept of logos and the Hebrew sephirot of the Kabbalah, both derivative echoes of the original African science of emanation. Yet, while later traditions often abstracted these patterns into metaphysical speculation, the people of Kemet embodied them in lived practice. They walked through temples aligned with the solstice sun, chanted tones tuned to the vibration of celestial bodies, and built monuments that still whisper of mathematical perfection. In this vision of existence, the human being occupied a sacred position, the bridge between heaven and earth. Just as the cosmos was composed of interdependent forces, so too was the individual a constellation of divine attributes. To live without awareness of this truth was to fall into disorder, to become fragmented like Asar before his restoration. But to awaken was to reassemble the scattered parts of the self into the unity of Heru, to rediscover the divine pattern within one's own being. The Neteru were, therefore, not distant gods to be feared, but guides for reintegration, mirrors through which the soul could remember its source. To speak of cosmic order in Kemet is to speak of continuity, the endless rhythm of birth, death, and renewal. Every sunrise was a reenactment of creation, every harvest a testimony to divine reciprocity. The universe was not a mechanical system, but a living organism infused with consciousness. Human beings, endowed with reason and moral will, were participants in this order, not its observers. The task of life was to sustain harmony, to ensure that one's thoughts, words, and actions resonated with the eternal laws set forth by Ra. This is why the greatest sin in Kemetic ethics was not disbelief, but imbalance, to act against Ma'at, to disturb the symmetry of creation. In the geometry of existence, nothing was arbitrary. The Neteru formed the scaffolding of being, the hidden architecture upon which all life rests. To study them is to study the blueprint of consciousness itself, a design both infinite and intimate. Within this divine architecture, man discovers that the same creative force that gives motion to the stars also breathes within his heart. To walk the path of Kemet is to awaken to this realization that the cosmos is not something we observe, but something we are. Every spiritual journey begins in darkness, not the darkness of evil, but of unawareness. In the teachings of Kemet, this state of unillumined existence is known as Sahu. It represents the first and lowest level of human consciousness, the condition of man when dominated by the senses, enslaved by desire, and bound to the illusion of separation. The Sahu individual identifies solely with the body, the emotions, and the transient patterns of material life. He knows the world through appetite and reaction, mistaking the temporary for the eternal. This is the stage of sleep, of forgetfulness, where the divine essence lies dormant beneath layers of instinct and conditioning. To the priests of Kemet, such a state was not condemnation, but beginning. For even the seed must first lie buried in darkness before it can reach for the sun. The Sahu level corresponds to what modern psychology might call the unintegrated self, the ego ruled by fear and craving. In this condition, consciousness is fragmented and reactive, moving from pleasure to pain without understanding the greater order that governs experience. The person of Sahu lives by external stimuli. Wealth, power, status, and sensory satisfaction define their worth. Yet beneath this restless pursuit lies a deeper hunger, the yearning for meaning that no possession can fulfill. The ancient texts describe this restlessness as the hunger of the Ka, the life force that, when disconnected from its spiritual source, becomes corrupted and unbalanced. Rituals, festivals, and even moral codes were designed to guide Sahu humanity toward remembrance, to reawaken the awareness that the body is not the self, but the vessel through which the divine learns. In the Pertem Heru, the book of coming forth by day, this stage of ignorance is symbolized through the soul's journey through the Duat, the underworld. The deceased, representing the human spirit, must confront illusions, shadows, and falsehoods created by his own mind. Each trial reflects a truth that was ignored in life: greed, pride, deception, and attachment. The aim of the journey is not punishment, but purification. To overcome these trials is to pass from Sahu toward awakening, to remember the eternal nature of the self beyond form. The death described in these texts is not the end of physical life, but the death of illusion. Thus, initiation in Kemet often involved a symbolic burial and resurrection, teaching the aspirant to die before dying, to transcend the Sahu within while still in the body. In the temples of initiation, the neophyte would be guided through a series of disciplines meant to discipline the senses and purify the mind. Fasting, meditation, silence, and the study of sacred geometry were not rituals of austerity for their own sake. They were methods to train perception. By stilling the noise of the body, one could begin to hear the voice of Ma'at within. The mind, once scattered among 1,000 desires, gradually became unified, capable of reflection rather than reaction. This was the first step toward Ab, the awakened heart. The aspirant was taught that what he perceived as the external world was a projection of his own inner state. Therefore, mastery of the self was the mastery of reality. The myth of Asar and Set illustrated this struggle vividly. Set, the force of chaos and ego, dismembers Asar, the divine spirit, scattering his parts across the land. This fragmentation represents the condition of Sahu consciousness, the self divided and unaware of its own divinity. Aset, the intuitive principle, searches for the lost pieces and restores them, symbolizing the work of the soul to recover unity. The resurrected Asar becomes the model of regeneration, the reminder that divinity, though temporarily obscured, can never be destroyed. The initiate, by internalizing this myth, learns that spiritual death is not annihilation, but transformation. The people of Kemet recognized that Sahu was not limited to the ignorant masses. It existed in every human being. Each moment of anger, jealousy, or indulgence was a descent into the Sahu state. The task was not to condemn it, but to understand and transcend it. Even the greatest priests underwent purification rites to prevent stagnation of consciousness. To remain in Sahu was to live in the shadow of one's own potential, to mistake the reflection for the source. But to observe Sahu within oneself with honesty was already the beginning of freedom. Awareness itself was the first light of resurrection. In more esoteric schools, Sahu was also associated with the element of earth, the densest vibration of matter. Earth represented both stability and limitation. It gave form to the divine spark, but also imprisoned it. The spiritual work, therefore, was to refine this element, to make the body a conscious instrument of spirit. Through diet, breath, movement, and moral integrity, the physical vessel was transformed into a temple for the Ka. The purification of Sahu did not reject the body, it sanctified it. The ideal was not escape from the world, but transformation of it through awareness. From a cosmic perspective, Sahu represents the first emanation of consciousness descending into form, the moment when divine unity experiences itself as multiplicity. It is the fall of spirit into matter, the necessary step for experience and learning. Without Sahu, there can be no evolution. Without ignorance, no awakening. Thus, the sages taught that the lowest point of descent contains the seed of ascent. Within every human heart lies the potential to rise, to move from instinct to insight, from appetite to awareness. The journey from Sahu to Ba is not a climb through external heavens, but an unfolding of what was always within. In today's world, the Sahu condition manifests as the global obsession with materialism, distraction, and external validation. Yet even now, the ancient call of Kemet resounds. Man, know thyself. The first level of Kemetic spiritual science invites humanity to awaken from the dream of separateness and remember its divine origin. It is the moment when the soul, weary of endless cycles of consumption and confusion, turns inward and whispers, "There must be more." In that whisper begins the revolution of consciousness, the first step of the eternal journey home. If Sahu is the realm of sleep, Ab is the moment of awakening, when the human being, no longer content with illusion, begins to listen to the silent pulse of truth within. In the sacred language of Medu Nater, Ab means heart. But in Kemet, the heart was far more than a physical organ. It was the throne of consciousness, the seat of reason, intuition, and divine intelligence. To think, to feel, and to judge were not functions of the brain, but emanations of the Ab. It was here, in the luminous chamber of the heart, that the soul measured itself against Ma'at, the cosmic law of truth. The sages taught that when a person's heart is purified of ignorance, it becomes an instrument of divine perception, a mirror reflecting the harmony of the cosmos. The awakening of Ab marked a transformation. Man ceased to live as a creature of instinct and became a conscious participant in creation. In the judgment scenes carved upon the walls of Thebes and Abydos, the Ab is weighed upon the scales of Maat. On one side rests the heart of the deceased, on the other, the feather of truth. This image, so often misunderstood as a posthumous trial, was in fact a metaphor for daily spiritual discipline. Each action, each thought, each emotion was a weight added or removed from the scale. The goal was not perfection, but equilibrium. To live so that one's heart remained light, free from deceit, hatred, and fear. A heart heavy with falsehood sank into darkness. A heart balanced in truth rose into light. To keep one's heart as light as a feather was therefore the highest moral and spiritual aspiration. It was not judgment imposed by a god, but the natural consequence of inner harmony or discord. At the Ab level of consciousness, knowledge becomes compassion. The seeker begins to see others not as competitors or threats, but as reflections of the same divine essence. The awakening of the heart dissolves the illusion of separation that dominates the Sahu state. Love, in its Kemetic sense, is not emotion, but recognition, the awareness that all life is bound by Ma'at. In this realization, forgiveness becomes possible, not as indulgence, but as understanding. The Ab-centered individual acts not out of reaction, but alignment. Decisions arise from stillness, guided by the inner balance of truth. In this way, Ab bridges the visible and the invisible, the human, and the divine. The sages of Kemet understood that awakening the heart required discipline. The temples prescribed methods of purification that engaged both mind and body. Rituals of fasting, sacred chants, the study of moral philosophy, and meditative silence were all designed to refine the ab. Each act of integrity polished its surface, each lie or act of selfishness dulled it. Over time, the initiate learned that the true offering to the gods was not incense or gold, but purity of heart. The texts declare, "No man enters the temple of the gods with an unclean heart." Thus, morality and mysticism were inseparable. Ethics was not a constraint, but the pathway to enlightenment. In the teachings preserved by modern scholars like Ra Un Nefer Amen, the ab corresponds to the transformation of emotion into divine intelligence. The heart becomes the governor of the mind, aligning thought with principle. When the heart rules, chaos subsides. When the intellect rules without heart, destruction follows. The Kemetic concept of Kamut Mket, the union of masculine and feminine energies, symbolizes this inner harmony. The active and receptive forces within consciousness must merge to produce balance. This union, achieved in the ab, generates a creative power that radiates as peace, clarity, and joy. The myth of Aset and Heru exemplifies this process. After the dismemberment of Asar, Aset gathers his fragments and through love and divine will conceives Heru, the child of light. This myth is the story of the heart, the power of love to restore what ignorance has broken. In the same way, the awakened ab resurrects the fragmented self, giving birth to a higher consciousness. Every act of compassion, every moment of truth, is a spark of Heru born within us. The battle between Heru and Set, light and shadow, is therefore not a cosmic war, but an inner dialogue between the heart and the ego. The triumph of Heru is the triumph of awareness guided by love. The ab stage also marks the birth of moral independence. The initiate no longer obeys external authority, but listens to the law inscribed within. This inner law is Ma'at, self-regulating, universal, and eternal. In the pyramid texts, the sage declares, "I have not lied, I have not stolen, I have not caused pain." These confessions, later misinterpreted as commandments, were affirmations of inner alignment. The initiate spoke them daily to calibrate the heart. In living by these truths, he became a vessel through which the divine could act in the world. The transformation was not theoretical, it was visible in conduct, in speech, in presence. The one who lives in Ma'at radiates serenity, for their energy resonates with the rhythm of the cosmos. Spiritually, ab represents the midpoint of the journey, the bridge between earth and heaven. It is the stage where man rediscovers his purpose and begins to live consciously. In the symbolic language of the temples, it corresponds to the hall of columns, where light filters between shadows and form becomes translucent. The initiate no longer walks in darkness, but neither is he fully in light. He perceives the laws of the universe, but must still embody them. The path ahead demands endurance, for the purification of the heart is continuous. Every moment of life becomes initiation, every challenge a test of equilibrium. When the ab reaches full harmony, the person transcends the reactive mind and enters a state of stillness. In this silence, the divine voice, the Ka, speaks clearly. The individual ceases to act from will and begins to act from wisdom. It is said that at this stage, the heart becomes a sun within the body, radiating light to all directions. The ancients called this state the shining of the heart. Modern mystics would call it enlightenment of the soul, yet in Kemet, it was simply living in Ma'at. The awakened heart transforms perception itself. Beauty becomes visible in all things, and every being is recognized as divine. Thus, Ab is not the destination, but the threshold. Beyond it lies Ba, the liberated spirit, the eternal aspect of being. Yet without the heart's awakening, the soul cannot ascend. The door to higher consciousness opens only when the heart is light, and truth has become one's nature. The priests of Kemet taught that the heart's wisdom surpasses all other knowledge, for it alone knows how to unite the opposites within man. To awaken the Ab is to rejoin heaven and earth within oneself. It is to live as the ancients once lived, in balance, in truth, and in the radiant calm of the divine. When the heart has become light as a feather and truth has become nature itself, consciousness ascends to its highest realization, the Ba. In the Kemetic system, Ba is not merely soul in the Western sense. It is the essence of divinity individualized, the immortal principle that transcends time and form. Depicted in hieroglyphs as a human-headed bird, the Ba symbolizes freedom, the ability of the spirit to travel between the seen and the unseen. Where Sahu represents bondage to the senses and Ab the awakening of the heart, Ba represents liberation, the awareness that the self and the creator are one. The Ba does not seek God. It remembers itself as divine. The ancients of Kemet taught that Ba is born through the refinement of the heart. It is the flowering of consciousness after long cultivation, the lotus rising from the mud. Through discipline, meditation, and the harmony of Ma'at, the initiate purifies the subtle energies of the Ka until the physical and spiritual are aligned. In this alignment, a luminous transformation occurs. The human being becomes a living nature, an expression of divine intelligence. The priests describe this as becoming light again, a return to the radiance of Ra, from whom all life emanates. To live as Ba is to live without fear of death, for the eternal has recognized itself in the transient. In the cosmology of Kemet, Ba is inseparable from Ka and Ku, forming a trinity of spiritual vitality. Ka is life force, Ba is divine consciousness, and Ku is the shining spirit, the radiant intellect illuminated by truth. Together, they represent the perfected human, body animated by Ka, heart governed by Ab, mind illuminated by Ku, and soul liberated as Ba. This union was celebrated in rituals of ascension, where the initiate symbolically merged with the sun, entering the eternal cycle of Ra. In this state, death ceased to be an end and became a passage, a continuation of consciousness in subtler realms. The texts speak of the Ba flying to the horizon, visiting the stars, communing with ancestors, and reuniting with the source from which all light proceeds. Practices leading to the realization of Ba were precise and scientific. Breath control, sacred chant, and visualization were used to harmonize the energy centers of the body. Geometry and sound merged as instruments of awakening. The same proportions that structured the temples of Luxor structured the human spirit. Through vibration, rhythm, and color, the initiate resonated with the cosmic order until individuality dissolved into unity. The priests of Heliopolis called this process nehast, illumination. The goal was not escape from the world, but participation in it as divine consciousness. To awaken the Ba was to see every moment as sacred, every form as a mask of the One. Dr. Muata Ashby, interpreting the ancient scriptures, describes Ba as the realization of the Christos within, the eternal presence that transcends ego and personality. In Kemetic language, this was known as Sahu Heru, the resurrected consciousness, the Son of Light reborn after inner crucifixion. Just as Heru rises after defeating Set, so does the awakened soul triumph over ignorance and duality. This is not metaphor, but metaphysics, the understanding that consciousness creates reality, and that to align with divine law is to shape existence according to harmony. The one who attains Ba perceives no conflict between heaven and earth, for they are two reflections of the same truth. In the temples, the rituals of Ba initiation culminated at dawn. As the first rays of the sun struck the sanctuary, the initiate stood in silence before the image of Ra, arms raised in the posture of praise. This was not worship of an external deity, but communion with the solar principle within. The golden light symbolized the awakening of divine awareness. The initiate, now conscious of the eternal, declared, "I am the shining one. I am the light that shines in the horizon." This affirmation marked the completion of the great work, the transformation of man into a conscious participant in cosmic creation. Philosophically, Ba represents the reconciliation of opposites. It is the synthesis of matter and spirit, finite and infinite, self and all. In psychological terms, it is self-actualization, the integration of every aspect of being into a unified whole. Yet in Kemet, this state was not the privilege of saints or kings. It was the destiny of all humanity. The Ba dwells in everyone, waiting for recognition. The path from Sahu to Ba is therefore universal, a journey from ignorance to remembrance. The sages taught that when one human being realizes the Ba, all creation benefits, for the universe itself evolves through the enlightenment of its parts. In the symbolic architecture of the temples, the Ba corresponds to the innermost sanctuary, the Holy of Holies, where only the purified may enter. Here dwells the statue of the god, veiled in silence and shadow, representing the divine self within. Few ever reached this chamber physically, fewer still entered it inwardly. Yet those who did became living gods, teachers, and healers, their words carrying the power of Heka. They no longer acted from desire or fear, but from creative will aligned with Ma'at. The ancients called them the Shining Ones, the justified souls, or the ancestors who live in light. To experience Ba is to rediscover one's eternal nature. The illusion of separation dissolves. Death becomes transformation. Life becomes a continual offering of gratitude. The Ba-conscious person walks the earth lightly, aware that every breath is the breath of Ra. Such a being radiates peace because they no longer seek, they have found. Their presence uplifts others, for they mirror the truth that lies dormant in all hearts. This is the culmination of Kemetic spiritual science, not worship, not dogma, but awakening, the realization that the temple, the priest, and the god are one and the same. To the people of Kemet, the temple was not a mere structure of stone. It was a living organism, a map of the universe, and a mirror of the human being. Every wall, corridor, and sanctuary reflected stages of consciousness, guiding the initiate from the outer world of illusion to the inner world of divine realization. The initiatory journey through the temples was both physical and metaphysical, a pilgrimage of the soul retracing the path of the sun, from birth to death, from ignorance to enlightenment. Each temple, aligned precisely with the stars and solstices, functioned as a sacred textbook written in geometry and light. To walk through its halls was to participate in the cosmic process of awakening, to enact in flesh the eternal drama of spirit's return to itself. The journey often began at Dendera, the temple of Hathor, goddess of beauty, joy, and divine love. Her sanctuary represented the awakening of the senses to higher harmony. The initiate entered through gates decorated with celestial dancers and musicians, learning that creation itself is rhythm, that music, when pure, can elevate the soul. The chants and sistrum sounds within the hall resonated with the body's energy centers, attuning the aspirant's vibration to Ma'at. Here, the lessons of pleasure, gratitude, and beauty were sanctified. The senses, once enslaved by Sahu, were now instruments of divine perception. From Dendera, the path led southward to Edfu, the temple of Heru, the falcon god of victory and illumination. Its towering walls told the story of the eternal battle between Heru and Set, light and chaos, awareness and ignorance. The initiate studied these reliefs not as mythic history, but as psychological instruction. Every conflict between gods mirrored an inner struggle between higher and lower self. Within the sanctuary, the aspirant learned to harness willpower and discipline, to become Heru, the one who sees clearly. Ritual combat and symbolic tests strengthened the inner fire, transforming emotional energy into spiritual strength. To stand in the temple of Heru was to confront one's shadow and emerge reborn as a warrior of light. The next stage of initiation often unfolded at Luxor, Ipet Resit, the southern sanctuary. The temple's very architecture embodied the human form, teaching that the body itself is the temple of God. Each hall represented an organ, each chamber a function of consciousness. Walking through Luxor was to walk through oneself. The outer court corresponded to the legs and movement, symbolizing moral action in the world. The hypostyle hall to the lungs, representing breath and rhythm, and the inner sanctum to the heart, the Ab, where divine awareness resides. At the culmination of the journey, the initiate entered the holiest chamber, the head, the place of illumination. Here, the saying, "Man, know thyself," revealed its literal meaning. By understanding one's body and mind, one understands the cosmos. Further south stood the temple of Abydos, dedicated to Asar, Lord of Resurrection. This was the final gate of transformation, where the initiate confronted death itself, not as an end, but as a doorway. In dark chambers adorned with stars and sacred texts, priests guided aspirants through rituals of symbolic burial and rebirth. Lying in sarcophagus-like niches, the initiate faced inner silence until all fear dissolved. Upon awakening, he was greeted by light and sound, a rebirth of perception. The walls of Abydos recorded the Osirian mysteries, the sacred narrative of dismemberment and restoration, reminding the soul that immortality is not attained, it is remembered. To complete the rites at Abydos was to transcend the cycle of ignorance and enter the state of Ba, the consciousness of eternity. Throughout these temples, architecture itself functioned as scripture. The ceilings mirrored the heavens, the floors represented the earth, and the columns stood as the pillars of creation. Each measurement encoded cosmic ratios, the golden mean, the square root of 2, demonstrating the unity of mathematics and spirit. Even the journey from outer court to inner shrine followed the path of the sun through the sky and the soul through the body. The initiate learned that initiation is not a single event, but a continuous ascent. Every dawn mirrored resurrection. Every sunset invited reflection. The temples were thus cosmic laboratories, where man could study the laws of creation and his own anatomy of light. The initiatory process also integrated the sacred science of Sekhem, the life energy that flows through all beings. Through breath, posture, and sound, the aspirant learned to raise Sekhem from the base of the spine to the crown of the head, a process akin to the later Indian concept of Kundalini. When the energy reached the eye of Heru, symbolic of the pineal gland, visions of light and sound opened the inner world. The initiate then perceived reality not through senses, but through direct awareness. The hieroglyph of the Ujjat eye, often misread as ornament, signified this illumination, the awakening of inner sight, the restoration of spiritual vision. These temple journeys were preserved through millennia as the heart of Kemetic education. Each priest, each scribe, each healer underwent them, not for status, but for transformation. The rituals of passage reflected the stages of human evolution, from ignorance to knowledge, from individuality to unity. They were reenactments of cosmic processes, teaching that the divine drama unfolds both in the heavens and in the human psyche. The initiate emerged not as a believer, but as a knower, one who had seen truth, one who had died to illusion and been reborn as a conscious agent of Ma'at. Today, many of these temples still stand along the Nile, their stones bathed in silence, yet alive with memory. Those who walk their corridors can still feel the vibration of chants, the resonance of sacred geometry, the pulse of a forgotten science. For the modern seeker, their message endures. The body is the temple, the heart the altar, and consciousness the offering. The journey through Kemet's sanctuaries is the journey through oneself, from the outer noise of the world to the stillness where the voice of the divine can finally be heard. Among all the principles that define the spiritual and intellectual grandeur of Kemet, none was more central than Ma'at, the universal law of balance, truth, and divine order. In the temples, she was depicted as a serene woman crowned with an ostrich feather. But to the sages, Ma'at was not merely a goddess. She was the architecture of existence itself. She represented the rhythm by which the sun rose and set, the reason rivers flowed and stars returned to their places in the sky. To live in Ma'at was to live in harmony with the cosmos, aligning every thought, word, and action with the pulse of creation. It was not an abstract moral code, but a scientific principle of equilibrium. Just as the body remains healthy through balance, so the universe maintains harmony through Ma'at. She was, as the pyramid texts declare, the foundation of the world, established by the Creator when all things came into being. Every aspect of Kemetic civilization, from governance to art, law, and education, was organized according to Ma'at. The pharaoh himself was not an autocrat, but the earthly guarantor of cosmic balance. His legitimacy depended on his ability to maintain justice, prosperity, and peace, mirroring divine order on earth. When he performed rituals in the temples, he was depicted offering the image of Ma'at to the gods, a symbolic act meaning, "I return the world to harmony." The measure of a ruler was not conquest, but equilibrium. A society that violated Ma'at through greed, oppression, or deceit was doomed to collapse, for imbalance in human affairs disrupted the cosmic pattern. Thus, Ma'at functioned as both spiritual compass and civic constitution, the first known articulation of universal ethics rooted in cosmic law. At the individual level, Ma'at governed the heart, the ab. In the afterlife texts, the deceased's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at. But this judgment was not a punishment, it was a reflection of natural law. A heavy heart, burdened by falsehood, could not ascend, just as a body weighed down by excess cannot rise. The 42 declarations of innocence, often mistranslated as negative confessions, were affirmations of a life lived in alignment with Ma'at. I have not lied. I have not stolen. I have not caused pain. I have not polluted the water. I have not diminished the offerings of the gods. These statements were not dogma, but inner calibrations, ethical exercises designed to refine consciousness. Each declaration was a step in moral physics, the science of maintaining resonance with truth. Philosophically, Ma'at represented the unity of opposites. Truth was not static but dynamic, existing in the balance between extremes. The sun, to nourish life, must both rise and set. The Nile must both flood and recede. Likewise, human virtue lay not in rigid perfection, but in the continual adjustment of intention and behavior. To practice Ma'atwas, to cultivate awareness, to perceive the subtle disharmonies within oneself and correct them before they spread outward. This discipline formed the core of Kemetic psychology and ethics. The priest taught that evil was not a force opposed to good, but imbalance, energy misdirected through ignorance. The cure was knowledge, honesty, and alignment. The relationship between Ma'at and science was profound. The same precision that governed morality also governed measurement. The architects who raised the pyramids and the astronomers who charted the heavens applied the principles of Ma'at in their calculations. Geometry, proportion, and rhythm were sacred because they reflected universal law. A temple built without symmetry would fall. A life lived without balance would decay. Both followed the same pattern. This understanding gave birth to an education system where ethics and mathematics, spirituality and engineering were inseparable. Knowledge, to be complete, had to serve truth, for truth was the organizing force of the cosmos. Scholars like Anthony Browder and Cheikh Anta Diop remind us that Ma'at was not a relic of ancient theology, but the ethical foundation of African civilization. Across the continent, echoes of her principles endure in Ubuntu of Southern Africa, which teaches that I am because we are. In the Yoruba concept of Ifa, where destiny is fulfilled through harmony, and in the Akan principle of Nyansa, wisdom as balanced understanding. Ma'at thus represents Africa's enduring contribution to global ethics, the recognition that morality is not imposed by gods, but discovered through the observation of nature and self. In a world fractured by greed and competition, her voice remains revolutionary, a call to restore wholeness through truth. In practical terms, to live in Ma'at meant cultivating 7 virtues: truth, justice, harmony, balance, reciprocity, propriety, and order. These were not commandments, but states of being achieved through mindfulness and humility. The person of Ma'at listened before speaking, gave before taking, and sought understanding before judgment. In every action they asked, does this sustain life? Does this create harmony? This ethical sensitivity extended beyond humanity to animals, water, and the earth itself. Ecology, therefore, was intrinsic to spirituality. To pollute nature was to violate Ma'at, for it disrupted the sacred equilibrium between all forms of life. In the temples, priests performed daily rituals to maintain this cosmic harmony. They recited hymns affirming the stability of the universe. Ma'at is established, and her enemies are fallen. The world stands because of her. These rituals were not superstitious performances, but acts of energetic maintenance, collective meditation sustaining balance between visible and invisible realms. The people of Kemet understood that human consciousness participates in the fabric of reality. When hearts were pure, crops flourished. When truth was forsaken, drought and disorder followed. The physical world mirrored the moral. To live according to Ma'at is ultimately to live consciously. It is to understand that every word has weight, every action a vibration, every thought a consequence. The sages taught that Ma'at is not something we practice. It is what we are when we remember our divine nature. When humanity forgets this, chaos, Isfet, arises. Yet even Isfet is not evil, but the shadow that reminds us to return to balance. Thus, Ma'at and Isfet are eternal partners in the dance of creation. The task of the soul is to remain centered, to hold the feather lightly and walk in truth. In the modern world, where imbalance has become a way of life, where economies exploit, societies divide, and nature suffers, the wisdom of Ma'at returns as prophecy. She calls not for belief, but for restoration, of integrity, of justice, of the harmony between humanity and the planet. To restore Ma'at is to restore ourselves, for her laws are written not only in the stars, but in the rhythm of our hearts. The ancients knew that when man lives in Ma'at, he does not need temples, for the universe itself becomes his sanctuary. The true worship of Ma'at is the way one walks, the truth one speaks, and the balance one keeps between heaven and earth. The journey from Sahu to Ba is not a tale confined to the temples of the Nile. It is the eternal story of humanity itself. The journey from ignorance to illumination, from fragmentation to unity, from forgetfulness to remembrance. In the final stage of the Kemetic Path, the human being, once bound by the illusions of matter, rediscovers their divine essence. The initiate who has walked through the fires of purification and the silence of the heart becomes what the ancients called a Neter Nefert, a beautiful god, not in the sense of vanity, but of harmony, balance, and radiant wisdom. To embody the divine is not to escape the human, it is to fulfill it. This is the return of the divine human, the restoration of the original purpose of creation, for the Creator to know itself through the perfection of man and woman. In the sacred cosmology of Kemet, humanity was not born sinful or fallen. It was born divine and temporarily veiled. Each person carried within them the spark of Ra, the life-giving light that animates all. The descent into matter, the Sahu state, was a necessary stage in the evolution of consciousness, a descent into limitation that makes self-awareness possible. Yet, as history unfolded and empires rose and fell, humanity forgot its origin. The externalization of religion, the separation of science from spirit, and the fragmentation of cultures obscured the living memory of Ma'at. The modern age, for all its technology, mirrors the Sahu stage, brilliant in knowledge, impoverished in wisdom. But every cycle of decline is also a preparation for rebirth. The ancients called this return Zep Tepi, the first time, a cosmic renewal in which divine order is reestablished. In this era of rediscovery, the teachings of Kemet reemerge not as myth, but as medicine. Across Africa and the diaspora, scholars, healers, and spiritual seekers are reclaiming the wisdom that once illuminated the Nile. Figures like Cheikh Anta Diop, Dr. Yosef Ben Yochanan, Anthony Browder, and Ra Un Nefer Amen have become modern scribes of Ma'at, restoring the link between ancestral knowledge and contemporary identity. They remind us that the genius of Kemet was never lost. It lives in the DNA of Africa, in its languages, rhythms, and philosophies. The revival of Kemetic spirituality is not a nostalgia for monuments, but a reclamation of consciousness. It is a reminder that the oldest wisdom on earth began not in Greece or the East, but in the heart of Africa, in the Black Land where humanity first learned to read the stars and listen to the soul. The return of the divine human also means the healing of polarity between male and female, reason and intuition, science and spirit. In Kemet, divinity was always expressed as complementarity, Asar and Aset, Geb and Nut, Shu and Tefnut. The suppression of one half of this duality, particularly the feminine principle, marked the decline of spiritual balance in later civilizations. The restoration of the feminine, the wisdom of Aset, the nurturing of Hathor, the justice of Ma'at, is essential to the rebirth of humanity. Without the heart, intellect becomes sterile. Without compassion, knowledge becomes destructive. The new initiation of this age calls not for conquest, but for cooperation, not for domination, but for alignment with the natural order. This rebirth also demands a reimagining of progress. The ancients measured advancement not by wealth or power, but by harmony, the degree to which a society mirrored cosmic law. The Kemetic temples were not factories of worship, but schools of transformation, producing healers, philosophers, artists, and astronomers who lived as extensions of Ma'at. Today, to restore that legacy means to rebuild not only monuments of stone, but temples of mind and community, spaces where ethics, science, and spirituality reunite. The wisdom of Kemet offers a blueprint for sustainable civilization, one where humanity acts as steward, not master of the earth, where technology serves consciousness, not the reverse, where the measure of greatness is not accumulation, but illumination. At the heart of this renaissance lies the recognition that the divine human is both ancient and new. The initiate of Kemet did not ascend into isolation, but returned to serve the community. Enlightenment was never selfish, it was responsibility. The Sahu lives for the self, the Ba lives for all. To embody divinity is to become a vessel through which life heals itself. This understanding transcends religion and creed. It is a universal law of consciousness. The African renaissance of spirit, art, and science emerging today is part of that same current, the reawakening of humanity to its original mission, to reflect the Creator's intelligence through beauty, justice, and love. The rebirth of the divine human also reconnects us with the ancestors, those luminous beings who once walked the earth in harmony with the stars. In the texts, they are called the Shemsu Heru, the followers of Heru, enlightened souls who guided civilization through wisdom, not domination. Their presence endures beyond death, for the awakened Ba transcends the boundaries of time. When we live in Ma'at, we align with them. When we act with truth, we continue their work. In this sense, ancestral veneration is not worship of the past, but participation in an ongoing lineage of light. We are not descendants of slaves or subjects, but inheritors of a priesthood that once measured the heavens and healed the earth. In modern times, this understanding becomes a call to action. To remember Kemet is to remember our responsibility to restore balance in society, in the planet, and within ourselves. The return is not a regression, but an ascension. The movement from fragmented humanity to integrated divinity. Each act of awareness, compassion, or integrity becomes a step toward Zep Tepi, the new first time. The future that awaits is not new in essence. It is the same truth rediscovered, the same sun rising again after a long night. The ancients taught that the world is renewed each day when the heart of Ra beats within man. When we awaken, we become that heartbeat. Thus, the journey from Sahu to Ba culminates in the restoration of the divine human, man and woman, as living temples of cosmic order. The walls of Kemet's sanctuaries may crumble, but their geometry endures within our consciousness. The same laws that guided the priests of Heliopolis still govern the stars above and the breath within. To walk the path today is to remember that divinity is not found in distant heavens, but in every heartbeat aligned with Ma'at. The resurrection of the divine human is therefore the resurrection of the world, a promise that light, though forgotten, can never be destroyed, for it lives in the essence of who we are. There comes a moment in every age when humanity must pause, look inward, and remember what it truly is. The sages of Kemet foresaw this, the cycles of forgetting and remembering, descent and return. They knew that civilization itself was but a reflection of consciousness, that the state of the world mirrors the state of the human heart. When hearts grow heavy, truth becomes distant. When hearts grow light, the world returns to harmony. This is the essence of the Kemetic journey, not escape from life, but its illumination. The path from Sahu to Ba is the path of every soul, from shadow to awareness, from confusion to clarity, from separation to unity. It is the journey of the Creator rediscovering itself through the beauty of its own creation. The final initiation, to become light again, was never about ascending to some remote heaven. It was about realizing heaven within. The people of the Nile believed that the soul, when purified by truth, literally became a star, a radiant point of consciousness rejoining the firmament of Ra. Man becomes as the sun, they said, when he remembers himself. The same truth shines within every human being today. Beneath the noise of modern existence, beyond the boundaries of race, creed, or nation, there remains the still flame of divinity, the Ka that breathes, the Ba that witnesses, the Ab that feels. To remember these is to resurrect Ma'at, to restore balance in both self and world. The wisdom of Kemet teaches that enlightenment is not a gift of the gods, but a discipline of living. It demands honesty, compassion, and courage, the willingness to see oneself clearly and act in harmony with truth. The temples may stand in ruins, but their purpose endures wherever a human being chooses awareness over ignorance, love over fear, balance over chaos. Every breath aligned with Ma'at is a prayer. Every just act is a ritual. Every moment of self-knowledge is a step toward eternity. The mystery schools of Kemet have never closed. They simply moved inward, waiting in the heart of those who still seek. To become light again is therefore not a metaphor. It is remembrance. Light is the natural state of the soul, obscured only by the dust of forgetfulness. When we clear that dust through knowledge, discipline, and love, we shine once more as reflections of the source. The journey is personal, but its impact is collective. Each awakened heart restores a measure of harmony to the world. The ancients said that when one person lives in Ma'at, all creation rejoices. The restoration of balance begins not with empires or institutions, but with a single act of awareness, a word of truth spoken, a life lived with integrity, a heart that remains open amid confusion. So as we close this journey through the wisdom of Kemet, we are not stepping away from the ancient world. We are stepping deeper into it, into the same eternal current that flows through the Nile, through the stars, and through the pulse within our own chest. The call of the ancestors is not a call to worship the past, but to fulfill it, to carry forward the science of the spirit that once illuminated the world. To live in Ma'at is to become that light, the living testimony that divinity was never lost, only hidden behind the veil of forgetting. And so the circle closes where it began, the Creator remembering itself through man, man remembering himself through the Creator. The temples of stone have spoken, the rivers have whispered, and the heart of the world beats once more in harmony with the sun. For those who listen, the message is clear, the same that was carved on the walls of Luxor thousands of years ago. Man, know thyself, and you shall know the gods, for they dwell within you.